call to order the Lancaster Finance Finance Committee and do that by calling the roll. Jocelyn? Not here yet. Emily? Not here yet. Michelle?
Here.
Stan?
Here.
And Dick Russell here, so we have a quorum. That allows me to move to, I guess I'll move to Bolton now to call their meeting to order.
All right, thank you. This is also a joint meeting with the Bolton Advisory Committee. We have myself and Don.
I think I saw.
And
Greg.
right, let's see, Bill.
Laura.
Bill Nichols.
Yep.
Yes.
And Craig.
Yep.
All right, and Greg and Omid are not here, so it's 4 of us.
Have you returned that to me yet?
Yes, thanks, Dick. It's all yours now.
Okay. Now I need someone from Stowe to step forward and tell me who's here from Stowe. I don't see any names I recognize. Does anyone?
Kevin Gross here. I'm with the Stowe Finance Committee.
Kevin Gross? Is that you, Kevin? Okay.
Yes, it is.
How many do you need for a quorum of your meeting?
We need 3 to have a quorum of the Finance Committee.
Would you like to be in attendance and call me when you get a quorum? And I will interrupt the meeting possibly so you can organize?
I can let you know when there are 3 of us on for sure. Yes. Who am I speaking with?
Okay. Well, at least we have an observer, Kirk, so we're okay. Let me say that this is a privilege for us to hear from the school, from the Nashoba Regional School District. We will be turning it over to them directly, and at the end there will be questions. But I would like you to keep in mind that this is a financial meeting only.
Recording in progress.
Oh, good. It's being recorded. Got it. It's a financial meeting only, and the questions should remain financial. And they should be for information you need or clarification. Okay, I'm not sure there'll be that many questions, but I will entertain the option at the end of this meeting. Right now, I think, Kirk, if you're ready, I'd just like to turn it over to you and Ross and let you make your presentation.
Thank you, Dick. I want to thank you for hosting on behalf of Lancaster our annual joint meeting of the FinComs and advisories. Bob, I believe Bolton is up next. So next year, Bolton will be the hosts of this meeting. So it is my great pleasure. I want to thank all the representatives from the Lancaster Finance Committee, the Bolton Advisory Committee, and the Stowe Finance Committee as well. I also want to introduce Mr. Ross Mulcairn. Ross is our Director of Finance and Operations, and he is the one that really helps me understand the numbers and what we can and can't do within the school system. So we have a presentation for you tonight. This presentation, if you've been following the ball in our presentations, you will see it's grown since then. But I'll let the presentation go ahead and tell the story. And so, Mr. Mulcairn, I believe you're going to bring that up on your screen. And
yes, I would. Is there anybody from Lancaster that's able to enable screen sharing? I just tried to, and it said it's been.
It'll be Kate.
I'm working on it.
Thank you, Kate. As the town administrator from Lancaster is doing that, I just want to say thank you and our appreciation for the partnership with the FinComs and advisory committees that are in attendance, along with our town administrators as we develop the budget. So as the superintendent said, it's a privilege and an honor to be able to do this work for the district and also to be in partnership with you all. Oh, looks like I can screen share, so I'm going to go ahead and do so.
Right.
Is everybody able to see that okay? Great. I'm just going to get myself a little bit better organized here in the home office. Okay. So again, this is our FY25 proposed budget. As of tonight, you will see some things that say February 28th. That's because we've already posted our meeting materials for tomorrow night's school committee meeting. They have not, advised us, addressed, or asked any questions on that presentation yet, but we provided you all with the most updated figures for this evening. So Superintendent Downing is going to go through our why. We'll also talk about equality and equity in budgeting, and then look at the budget as far as timeline, the work to date, and town assessments, and then talk about summary and next steps. So I'll turn it back to Superintendent Downing.
Thank you, Ross. It's important to go through the why of the school system so that the representatives in this room and anyone in the public who may be watching understands what it is they're purchasing when we are putting together a school budget. We begin with our mission that we inspire and challenge all learners to realize their unique potential and become active contributors to their community. And this is important to us because we want our students to be very productive both here and in communities beyond the community in which they're raised, where they may live someday. In our vision, we look for all members of our organization to be able to be their best selves, pave their path, and impact the world. This vision was constructed through a group of constituents that involved teachers, parents, school committee members, administrators, and in part of our strategic work in recent years. Steeped deeply in the decisions that we make around the budget are the core values. These are the things for which, when we are making decisions, particularly around personnel, because all of you know our budget, 80% are personnel costs in the form of salary and benefits. So when we make those decisions, we have to think through this lens of what we value, because we value academic achievement, personal growth, voice, choice, and agency, lifelong learning, a safe, caring, and inclusive community, collaborative partnerships, innovation, and a sense of belonging for all. And when I mean all, I mean each and every student in our school system. So a theory of action is basically a statement of if this, then that. And so as we look at this theory of action, really what we're saying here is if we're able to, through good communication and protocols, clearly align the curriculum, innovative practices, shared leadership, equitable opportunities, and outcomes for all, we will inspire and challenge all learners to realize their unique potential in becoming active contributors to their community. In this presentation that we've done the past 2 years, we've built our budget on practices around that effective resource allocation by establishing clear class size standards, administrative standards, dean standards, as well as non-personnel standards like materials, for instance. So these are the things that we apply to the strategic work that we have to help us realize the mission and vision I've outlined for you. So here's what's important to look at when we're building a budget, particularly around staffing. Equality means what are the ratios that we use that are the standards across the school system for staffing our classes and our offices. You can see administration is staffed at a rate of 250 students per administrator. Guidance counselors are at the same rate. For each dean, there's an 800 student per town standard we use. Standard class sizes are not to exceed 24 students per classroom at the beginning of the school year. And in grades kindergarten through 2, that class size standard is capped at 22 students per classroom at the beginning of the year. Now with equity essentially means you get what you need, and we staff the environment in a way to help facilitate that. So for students that need specialized programming through their IEPs, through 504 plans, English learners, Title I students, or even students that are needing extra supports through our multi-tiered systems of support, equity staffing is based upon what the complexity and the demand of the students in that environment look like. So it may not look the same school to school because of those targeted programs. And I will
So
turn
as we-
back to Mr. Mulcairn to talk about the process we use throughout the budget season.
So as we've updated our budget and warrant subcommittee, we've certainly presented this to school committee as well. You can see here that our staffing analysis and really the kickoff to our budgeting season begins when we build the timeline. But our major piece is the staffing analysis workshop with the principals and the departments. And then we move into the rest of the activities. We begin with staffing because it's critical to know that piece as it makes up the majority of our budget. Once we finish up with that, we start working on non-salary items. Superintendent Downing spoke to the per pupil approach that we have to the majority of our non-salary for our budgets. Obviously, departments submit those a little bit differently, as facilities isn't necessarily by a student count, but we look at other measures. So throughout that process, we just continue to build and build our drafted budget. And we work as an administration, not only with the superintendent and I, but with each of the heads of these departments, the directors or the coordinators. We work with our building administrators. We work with our athletic director. We work with our extended learning director, our food services manager. We talk with our insurance and benefits providers to get a range and get an idea of what might be coming. We obviously work with our colleagues across other systems to understand what they're forecasting, they're seeing as we troubleshoot and get ready for our budget workshop that this year happened on January 17th. You know, what's a little bit different about this year's is that our OPEB Management Advisory Committee made a recommendation, I think is a really strong recommendation. And I see some of those members here today. I know that Mr. Cole is here from Bolton. I think Mr. Wysocki just joined as well. Scott Powell from our school committee sort of was the liaison and ran that. So I thank you to all those people. And I also know there's a couple others that I didn't mention. My apologies. But again, we thank them. And Mr. Trussell, you were there as well. But that was really good to do the dive on the information about OPEB and then also have a recommendation that we can move forward with and can be flexible in the future and to review it on a periodic basis. So we had a school committee budget workshop middle of January. Shortly after that, we received our Chapter 70 aid and we're notified of what the minimum local contributions would need to be for each of our towns. We provided an update to the school committee a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, on the budget. And then obviously we're here tonight on the 27th. Tomorrow night, we do our second budget update to the school committee, and we'll talk more about that in the ahead here. And we did receive our E&D certification already, so that's checked off.
Ross, if you'll forgive my interruption here as well, and I know this is the slide. I also want to take an opportunity to recognize our 3 town administrators, Ms. Hodges, Mr. Lowe, and Ms. Demkowski. We make every attempt every month to meet and discuss the finances of the school district relative to the town. And we've had an opportunity in the last 5 weeks to meet twice as a group, but we also were able to meet one-on-one with each of the town administrators to understand what are the complexities that they have to manage in their budget constructions as well. So in this, to say this is an easy budget season would be ridiculous right now, because we've had some unexpected curves at us relative to constructing the budget. And 2 of those are, we had some significant costs in special education increases, and that was due to, with students who have joined us in the district that we are happy to receive, we need to pay for the cost of their education. And when they come in after the budget cycle has already been approved the previous May, we will have some cost increases to that. So we had to deal with that this year, as well as the increase in added district placement tuitions across Massachusetts. The real big hit for us was the Chapter 70 funds. If you're familiar with our past presentations, we were receiving an additional $600,000 to $800,000 the last 2 seasons due to the Student Opportunity Act and the additional funding by the criteria for which we met. Well, because we are in a declining enrollment scenario currently in Nashoba, we were put into what is called the hold harmless category. And when you're in the hold harmless category, you can only receive the minimum aid, which is your enrollment as calculated by DESE through our October 1 submissions, and $30 per student. So our increase was 3,078 students for which we're financially responsible times $30 a student. The committee, everyone here in the finance committees should know that our Chapter 70 aid will always go up every year. It will never go down. But when you're in the hold harmless because you have an enrollment going down, that's why you receive the minimum aid. I also think it's important to note that due to inflation over the past 2 years, the increase in Chapter 70 aid was at 4.5% year over year of the total pool of dollars that are distributed to Massachusetts school systems. And that's a statutory limit. This year, based on the fact that inflation has stabilized relative to the past 2 years, the increase in Chapter 70 aid only went up 1.3%. So the overall pool of funds for Chapter 70 did not go up at the same rate as it had in the previous 2 years. As a matter of fact, we've learned that there are 212 school systems that were receiving additional SOA dollars last year that are in the same situation we are in this year. So we have had that challenge to really overcome. Another major factor, of course, is our contractual obligations. You know that our budget and personnel costs, about 80% of the budget goes to salary and benefits. And of course, a new factor, which Mr. Mulcairn will explain here, is the new debt for our high school construction project. And so as we get later, you'll see how that's separated apart so you get an understanding of what the operational increases are relative also to each town's assessment. Next slide.
Okay, so we began our public presentations on the budget on January 17th, as I mentioned when looking at the timeline. At the budget workshop on that date, we presented an operating budget of 68 essentially 7 million. Again, it's important to note that we're looking at operating budget only here with the onboarding of debt for the new high school project. We're trying to be very clear and delineate between operating budget and debt service and debt assessment. So again, from an operating standpoint, the proposed budget at that time was 6.91% over what it had been last year. We made some adjustments going into the second meeting, which is really update number 1 with our school committee. We made some reductions to technology, facilities, and special education. Some of you may be aware that we're a part of the Assabet Valley Collaborative. Assabet Valley Collaborative essentially does our servicing for our special education transportation. The member towns the Assabet Valley Collaborative districts that we are a part of did some good work under the guidance of their director to write a bid that was structured differently than we had done in the past. And what that resulted in was really a decrease in what we expected our special education transportation to go up. So we were able to back out some of that. We also backed out a little bit of our tuition increases because the rate that's being set by the Operational Services Division for the state is lower than it was last year. So we feel comfortable where we're at. And then we also took out some proposed new programming. We were setting up a potential new special education classroom for really the kindergarten, first and second grade level. We have a 3rd through 8th strand right now. We're expanding to the high school with no additional cost next year with reassignment of staff, but we really wanted to shape that out to be a K-12 program. And we're just not there yet. We're going to relook at it for FY26. So with some of that stuff coming out of the budget, we're able to reduce to about 67.8 million, which was about 5.5% over the previous year. In tomorrow, these are published documents. We have some other reductions in there to back out the operating budget again, and it brings it down even further. We also applied some offsets that on the revenue side will change some things, but again, we're able to back out some more things in the budget. And as it stands, what was being presented to school committee tomorrow night operationally is a 4.5 essentially increase over the FY24 voted budget. So, as I said at the last school committee meeting on the 7th of February, we did look at the fact of where our town assessments landed based on our relationship with the town administrators and those conversations, and felt like some more work needed to be done. So based on the direction from our school committee, we've been working on determining reductions that could total 1.5 million. So based on what's being presented tomorrow night, we've identified 1.2 million in reductions and offsets to reduce the assessments to the following. This is what Superintendent Downing was referring to before. You'll see this throughout the presentation, and we've been doing this at school committee as well. So for each town, we've separated out the operating budget assessment, the capital debt assessment, and then the total assessment. So with the high school debt coming on board, we think it's important to do this. Otherwise, as we take on more debt for the high school, we want to make sure that we're clear that this is not a change or an increase in the operating assessment or the operating budget assessment for the schools. So here it is in big general terms. So we're going to be moving forward into tomorrow night with that number. Every year we present the drivers. So these have been long-standing categorical pieces. These are not the same things that we present through monthly operational reports, but these are within the budget year over year. We present this. So I think what's important to note, if you look at the 1-year change column, it's third to last, right next to FY24, or excuse me, FY25 proposed is some of these changes. The immediate thing that you can see is the high school debt increase. And then when you look at the transportation for special education, that's another significant increase. And our special education, not including transportation, is a significant increase. The remainder of these things, I think, are pretty in line with some, neighboring and local district, what they're seeing. Our salary increases, insurance and benefits, those types of things is what we're seeing as some typical. I do want to also point out facilities. I think that everyone is no stranger to facilities being a significant part of the budget. We've done some good work in working with a collective purchasing group on our utilities. That includes our oil, natural gas, electricity, and being part of collective bidding on those types of things, and being able to work with an energy consultant to be very flexible and have lots of different options to lock in as we look at rates. Obviously, utilities are in a little bit better of a situation than they were this year or last year at this time. But again, it's important to note that we've decreased. We're also going to be using some food services revenue to partially pay for custodians. That's also driving down the facilities department budget. If you think about the fact that some of our custodians spend a good chunk of their day working in our cafeterias, we can directly charge those types of things and use that offset. So here it is in a different format, but as Superintendent Downing said, the majority of our budget is based on our salaries and our contractual obligations, and insurance and benefits are part of that as well. That includes our health insurance, dental insurance, but it also includes our operational insurance, things like workman's comp, property, auto, all those types of things are built into that as well. But you can see them as a percentage of the entire budget. Not to confuse sort of the screen here, but for those of you who follow school committee or attend budget and warrant, I know that I don't know if Brian Boyle's here. He's often from Bolton at our meetings, as well as Mr. Trussell from Lancaster. So we've organized the total budget in terms of how we present our operational reports. So you can sort of follow along again with each one of these things. So the orange is really last year's voted budget. And then you can see each iteration of the budget that we presented this far as a proposal to our school committee, ending with what's being officially presented tomorrow night. But again, it's obviously in published materials already. The big changes here are under system-wide. That's gone up because that does include the high school debt. We've included the debt in this format. The other pieces that I'd like to note are the curriculum and professional development. That's our teaching and learning department. And if you look at the actual overall increase, even though it says 30%, it's really going up just about $300,000. Now that includes some salary obligations. 200,000 of that is an allocation that we've put in. We need a new K-5 literacy curriculum. We've identified it. We've been working with the state. Our teaching and learning department's been really leading the charge, obviously, in this, in working with a group of, I think it's over 20 teachers, in understanding what our needs are, where we're at with our curriculum review, and how we can best meet the needs of each and every kid relative to literacy K-5. It's no secret to anyone here, obviously, that if we're not building that basic block of a foundation in their career, we can't achieve our vision and our mission for each and every one of our students. We talked about the special education costs going up. Our technology remains relatively steady. We did take some things out of the budget during the process of developing the budget that were in there, and that's backed down our numbers a little bit. We've also done some things where we're going to wait on developing some of our infrastructure technology-wise when it comes to our applications. We're trying to get to a place where our applications are all tied together, and we're just going to have to wait on some of that. It's not critical, but again, we're looking to do that. Then you can see in general, our school-based budgets don't fluctuate all that much. We do see some changes in what's been proposed because enrollment may be down and we don't need as many sections, or enrollment may be up and we need more sections. The athletic budget is more or less staying the same. Obviously, you have costs that go up there, but we're also building some assistant coaches' fees in there as well, or stipends in there as well. So that's part of the increase. But again, not a significant increase when you look at the total budget, but just from a percentage standpoint. So back to looking at the operating side of the budget, again, for comparison's sake, we're not far off right now from sort of where we've been in the past, and not much different than we were last year. We understand there's a different landscape here because on the revenue side, we're dealing with a much different Chapter 70 state aid situation. But again, you can see it relative to the voted increases in the past of the operational budget as of compared to where we're right now. Superintendent Downing, is there anything else that you wanted to add in before we look at town assessments?
I thought that was very thorough, Mr. Mulcairn. Please proceed.
Okay. So our town assessment calculations, I know that many of you are well attuned to this, but essentially things get made up after we take a look at our Chapter 70, after we take a look at some of the reimbursements that we receive for regional transportation, what use we're using of excess and deficiency. We really have these main parts, which is the minimum local contribution, which is determined by the state for each one of our towns, our variable assessment, and our debt assessment. Superintendent Downing, did you want to speak to any of the local contribution before I jump into the data?
Yes, thank you. So the minimum local contribution is the amount of money the town must spend on education as determined by the state of Massachusetts. It's calculated using the equalization value of the town to determine the town's ability to pay. So it's casually known as the wealth factor. What I'll remind the committees that are here tonight is two of our towns, Stowe and Bolton, are up against the statutory limit of 82.5% in terms of their equalization value. So their potential to grow there is at the ceiling, whereas the town of Lancaster is just south of 70%. And so some of the increases we see in Lancaster are due to the fact that their equalized valuation of the towns has been increasing in recent years. So in one way, that's good news because it's saying the value of the town continues to grow. What makes that difficult is it makes things more expensive as that equalization value increases.
So here's the data on the trends of minimum local contributions. You can see that there's been some relatively steady increases on these. And again, these are things that are determined by the state and provided to us that we each town must spend, and it shows up through those assessments. You can see that there's been a little bit of an increase, I think, relative to Lancaster versus the others, but in general, they continue to go up every year. So the variable assessment is that piece that's left after all of the other revenue and the minimum local contributions are factors in. The language that's here in italics is from the regional agreement. And I know that many of you are aware it's based on a 5-year rolling average of enrollment within the district from each of the member towns. So you can see here just the data on this. I think it's important to take a look at how that changes the percentages of the operating assessment. So if you look at that bottom table, Bolton, Lancaster, and so you can follow along where really, so for Bolton, it's gone down a little bit every year, and it's more or less steady from last year to this year based on its percentage of enrollment in the district. Lancaster, on the other end, has continued to trend upwards every year for the past 4 years. And then Stowe has done a little bit of a decrease over time as well. And what's interesting, and this is just the way it happens to work out, is essentially, with Bolton holding relatively steady going into this year, Stowe and Lancaster are sort of trading portions of percentages. So here's the 5-year average that's used, and you can see each year's trend. So Stowe has continued to decrease a little bit every year. We certainly see this trend even at the elementary level in Stowe. When I began as the center school principal in the 15-16 school year, we had 100 more students essentially than we do right now in the building. So enrollment continues to go down in Stowe, as well as in Bolton over time. What's interesting is that Lancaster has continued to increase its enrollment within the district. Therefore, its 5-year rolling average continues to go up, and its percentage of the assessment continues to go up.
Mr. McCarron, I'd like to add in terms of enrollment that I want people to know and understand that the changes in enrollment are not due to students in our town going to other locations for their education. It is a result of census, population of school-age children in our towns. So as you see decreases in Stowe, we know that there are fewer students living in Stowe that are ages 5 to 18. And that has been increasing in the town of Lancaster and decreasing, but at a slightly slower pace in Bolton.
So here's what the variable assessment has looked like over time. Obviously our budgets go up, but you can see if you look at FY21, for example, versus FY25, the difference between Bolton and Stowe and the difference between Lancaster and Bolton have both shrunk. So the 3 towns are closer in line with what their actual variable assessments are versus what it was 5 years ago. So I quickly just want to talk about capital debt assessment. A lot of the next couple of slides are from a December school committee meeting. Here you can see the enrollment at the high school, and the quoted language above is directly from the regional agreement, which was just redrafted last spring and approved by all 3 member towns. So when it comes to capital costs for the high school, which includes debt, we look at the October 1 enrollment of the current fiscal year and projecting our assessment of the next fiscal year. So you can see how the percentages of the total enrollment at the high school break down between Bolton, Lancaster, and Stowe as of October 1 of this year. You can also see how the changes in that left column, you can see what the actual enrollment is, but then you can see the changes in the percentage over time. And again, Bolton continues to decrease as far as a percentage of the high school. Lancaster continues to increase, and Stowe has increased a little bit as well. So here's the enrollment at the high school in the graph form, and you can see Lancaster has continued to go up in actual numbers, while Stowe and Bolton have relatively gone down over time.
And if I can comment there as well.
Yep.
This is what I would actually refer to as the Minuteman effect as well. In recent years, the participation in Minuteman from 8th grade students in Bolton and Stowe has increased dramatically and has remained relatively flat in Lancaster. And that's part and due because when applications come into Minuteman, they try to bring their acceptances according to the ratio of their member towns to Minuteman. And so Lancaster has always participated really at their full potential relative to Minuteman structure, and Bolton and Stowe have grown to meet what their potential is for attendance at Minuteman.
So here's the total capital debt assessment for FY25. The previous high school renovation, ironically, is in its last payment year in FY25. That will come off our books then. The track and field has another few years left on it before it comes off the books. The leach field and fuel storage, those are, excuse me, that's a bond anticipatory note. And we pay a certain percentage of the overall initial borrow every year, plus some interest. We could leverage this up a little bit, but again, with taking on the new construction at the high school, that would not change. But again, the leach field and fuel storage are here, as well as the high school's new construction. Again, it's first year of the initial $30 million bond that we sold. So the majority of that obviously is interest in year one. Again, not hard to understand or see how our capital debt assessment is going to increase with the addition of the first stage of high school borrowing. Right now is actually a good time for me to recall and also thank members of our bond advisory group that worked with myself and Superintendent Downing over the summer to understand, some input, feedback, and direction on our borrowing for the high school. Given where interest rates were at, what our cash flow needs are at, we did a smaller borrow instead of doing everything at once. I know that during the building project information sessions, we often shared what borrowing all of the required portion of the district's share for the high school would be at once and up front. Obviously, we didn't need to do that. And it's probably going to yield some good results as we're signaling and hearing that the Federal Reserve is going to reduce its rates. They did not last month, earlier this month. However, they are saying that the news is good, and we hope that continues to work our way, and we can do some more borrowing with a lower interest rate as we take on more debt. We also received some good news from the MSBA. For those of you who may not be aware, Superintendent Downing, do you want to speak to that, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I'll be happy to, Mr. Mulcahy. This was part of the governor's supplemental budget that came out in July, where MSBA projects that were already in the pipeline received more funding through the raising of the square footage ceiling and new projects coming in. Well, Nashoba happened to be in the 1 year in between those two bandwidths. So an additional motion was passed to include us in that change of square foot ceiling. That brought an additional 16 million in grant funding, or excuse me, just short of 15 million in grant funding to the project. So that's good news because the cost of the project stays the same. The voted number was 241 million. It's just that the MSBA will be picking up more of a proportion of that share now.
So based on the numbers at the high school as of October 1, here is the FY25 share of the debt for each one of our towns. And of that 2.6 million, this is what it boils down to. This is the number that you see in the other presentations, or excuse me, the other slides where it breaks down the operating budget assessment, capital debt, and what the total assessment is. So we've talked about the minimum local contribution, the variable assessment, the debt assessment. So what does that ultimately mean for the assessment of our towns? So the total proposed budget of that 69 million, 2.6 of it obviously is related to capital debt that we just talked about. So we're able to generate between state aid and regional transportation reimbursement, some of our interest on our investments, things like that. We're able to generate about 13.5 million towards the budget. The final remaining amount to be assessed is that 53.6. 30 of that is the minimum local contributions as required by the state for the towns, which leaves us with the variable assessment of 23.5 million. So here's the numbers that you typically see within the budget document. When you combine the fixed assessment and the variable assessment, that's what you get from your operating assessment. Again, the fixed assessment is dictated by the minimum local contribution. The variable assessment is subject to the 5-year rolling average. So here's the total on the far right of the bottom table. But again, the actual operating change is different than that, but that's what the percentage increase is with the actual high school debt factored in. So here are those revenue sources. So the assessments are Chapter 70 aid, regional transportation, Medicaid reimbursement that we get for services that we provide to students. Our investment income, I don't know which of our towns use MMDT, the Massachusetts Municipal Deposit Trust, but it continues to yield really good results as we use that to house our funding prior to it going out in the different warrants for payroll and for payables. The other piece here is the E&D appropriation. So you can track that to see traditionally the last several years we've used 1.2 of our E&D fund towards a revenue source for our budget. So this year we certified at 2.4 million, which is really strong. We've increased that given that our Chapter 70 has gone down while our overall costs that we're obligated through what we need to do for our students and what we need to do for our contractual obligations obviously has not decreased along with the Chapter 70. We also received some reimbursement on charter school as well. So here's that breakdown of the operating, the capital debt and the total assessment that I talked about a little bit before. You can see those totals of 8.2, 10.5, and 7.2. But I think we're really trying to focus in on the operating budget assessment because that high school debt, obviously that was approved by the towns and that with the debt exclusions is on and is not coming off, obviously. And it's just something that we need to make sure we visualize and understand as separate from the operating budget. Superintendent Downey?
So, as Mr. Mulcairn explained, really our target was to be able to contract the budget by $1.5 million. And the moves that we've made to date bring us to about just over $1.2 million. We're going to be working with our school committee tomorrow night in discussing the moves that we can be making. And the public budget hearing, Ross, as I'm looking back at the schedule, I believe it's the 13th, but we need to double check that. If you could look on the school committee planning calendar, because I know there's a shift there.
Yeah, I'll check right now.
Thank you. So we can give everybody the accurate information here. But what I would like to say about this, and then the official budget vote will happen on March 13th. So as we are $300,000 short of that $1.5 million contraction, I want to take this opportunity to let everyone know that we've been working closely with the bargaining units in the school system to look at doing some basic restructurings to our benefit packages in an effort to reduce the total cost of the benefit packages while also maintaining that they stay within reasonable costs for our employees. I'm very pleased to report, and you are all the first to hear it, our committee will hear about this tomorrow night as well, is that we do have a tentative agreement on that, of which I cannot release the detail yet because it needs to be fleshed out, and then ratification from both the bargaining units and the school committee. But is very positive sign that our educators has been extremely helpful in working with us to help us close this gap of $1.5 million. So I would anticipate that barring ratification of the agreements that we met tentatively today, that we will be able to meet and slightly exceed that $1.5 million contraction. I just cannot report those numbers to you today because they have not been voted on and approved by those units. So once we bring the budget to vote on the 13th, as we know, they will go to annual town meetings in May, where we'll give brief presentations there. So it's at this point, Mr. Trussell, that we would like to stop and entertain any questions you have from the Finance Committee members or the Advisory Committee.
All right, first of all, thank you very much for that presentation. We'll shortly find out if any questions were generated. I want to remind people, and I think you were saying, if you have any questions, this is not the only night. On 3/6, you'll be able to ask questions directly also. So let me go first to, let's see, Bob in Bolton Advisory. Do you want to go through your members, your present members for questions, please?
Sure. Anybody in the Bolton Advisory Committee have questions? Okay, looks like Don Cole. Go ahead.
Yeah, are there any new hires in the budget at this point?
No, Mr. Cole, as a matter of fact, there's some contractions. So what we had in the original proposal was our class sizes in Lancaster teetering around the class size standard. And so we had included some sections at kindergarten, 4th and 5th grade there that we've pulled back because we look at our kindergarten number, it's not realizing 4 sections to date. Now, we were tricked into this last year thinking it, and we ultimately needed 4 sections or were able to move one from Florence Sawyer. But at 4th and 5th grade, we're pretty confident we're going to be able to maintain 3 sections in the classrooms there. So no, there are no additional positions. And we'll be going over those positions in more detail tomorrow night with the school committee.
Very good. One more, if I may. On the interest, it sounds like we've got a $30 million bond that's going to cost us $2.1 million. I think that's roughly at simple interest, that's like 7%. Is that the stated interest rate, or am I?
No, the coupon, Mr. Cole, was 5%. That initial payment is higher. It's just the way it's structured, so that will come down in the second year. I am happy to send the debt schedule to the 3 FinCom Advisory Committee chairs, and they can distribute if that's okay by you.
That would be great. Thank you, Ross.
Sure. Thank you.
Anyone else, Bob?
Anyone else from Bolton? I would just like to make a comment, and first, thanks very much for the presentation. Thanks for all the detail, and I also I think we all appreciate the efforts that you went through to reduce the budget and get to some of those cost savings. I shared this with the Bolton School Committee reps a couple weeks ago, but when we from our perspective, when we're looking at the budget numbers, in the town of Bolton, the NRSD assessment is about 60% of our operating budget. So when we look at the new revenue we're going to generate, ideally, the school assessment would be about 60% of that new revenue, the increase in the assessment. I think the preliminary numbers you showed tonight, I think you're going to, for Bolton, absorb about 100% of the new revenue that we'll generate in FY25. So that, that's the concern on our end when we look at the budget numbers.
Mr. Guerrero, if I may respond. Mr. Trestle, may I respond?
Sure, please do.
I think you're accurate in that claim. I think the piece that is not fleshed out yet is going to be the adjustment to the health insurance models. So stay tuned on that, because that is going to provide some relief there.
Yeah, great. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I appreciate all the work you've done to reduce the budget as much as you have, and we will be looking forward to any other additional savings you can find.
Thank you.
And anyone else, Bob?
No, I think that's it for Bolton. So back over to you, Dick. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Kevin, would you take charge for Stowe, please?
Scary thought. So I've been joined by Evgenia Petrova, another FinCom member. We lack quorum. I imagine, is it okay for us to ask questions without quorum?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't understand all the details there.
Yeah, Mr. Trestle, I do believe it's quite fine for the Stowe FinCom to ask questions here as participants. That's part of the norms of this meeting as well. Would you agree, Mr. Trestle?
I'm sorry, I missed that once more.
Mr. Gross said that they don't have quorum, but I do believe it's within our norms to still allow the Stowe FinCom to ask the questions.
I would fully agree with that. Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you very much. I just had one observation. That was, and by the way, let me join the others who've thanked you already for the wonderful detail and the excellent presentation. It is appreciated. You mentioned the classroom sizes. The norm was around 24, 22, I think, for some other age groups. How does that align with some of the thinking that's gone into classroom sizes looking forward to the new high school?
That's a good question, Kevin. So we are constantly looking at class sizes. High schools are a lot more complex. So for instance, our science department is the most heavily staffed because they have to have licensure that is specialized licensure for physics and biology and chemistry, whereas an English department teacher is an English department teacher. So you have efficiencies there. So we do monitor at the high school our class sizes and target 24-1. There are situations based upon how many students have an interest in an elective, for instance, that the teacher will authorize, yes, we can go higher than the 24 ratio, but many of our classrooms at the high school are in the teens as well. So we're continuing to do an analysis of the high school class sizes. And I'll share that we're going to present to the committee tomorrow. One of the contractions we're making is reducing a section of world language, because we're able to combine, without removing any courses, we're able to combine some courses together and stay under that 24 cap.
Okay.
Well, your goal is no more than 24, but how many classes are actually approaching 24?
That's a good question, Dick.
It's not that many.
Yeah, it is not that many. I will tell you there are 4 classrooms we're really keeping our eye closely to, and this is where we're playing. This is where we're slicing it a little thin. I'm going to be honest. In Lancaster, at kindergarten, 4th and 5th grade, our 4th and 5th grade are going to be approximately 70 students next year with 3 teachers. So classrooms will be 23 and 24. If we were to get a run on enrollment in those grades, we would be forced into looking at how we could add a section or additional supports those classrooms. Kindergarten's always a tricky number. Currently, our enrollment is at 52, which would warrant 3 sections. They would need to bring in 15 more students to trigger the 4th section. So we'll watch that. And we're also watching the 5th grade section in center, knowing right now we are only carrying 3 sections at center for 5th grade. But the current 4th grade is sitting at 70 or 71 students. So it is slicing it thin in that regard. All other classrooms in the district, or excuse me, and then we're also watching the Florence Sawyer 3rd grade sections as well. So these are the things that we're monitoring closely. All other sections are not showing risk at going over those thresholds.
It's interesting that number of students is going down, but class size in some instances is being tested.
Mr.
I can see how they both happen, but
yeah,
it's interesting.
That's a response to as we were going through the entry process when I was onboarded a couple years back. You know, there was a strong feeling from our financial leaders in the 3 towns that do we develop standards for how we're building our classrooms, and I couldn't agree more. And so we looked back to some school choice documents. I will say last year our committee recognized the need to bring in more revenue to the district, so we reopened school choice in a very targeted and specific way in certain grades and locations. And our school choice offset that Mr. Mulcairn is going to present tomorrow night has resulted in $150,000 in revenue without having to add a single employee to the district. So that's been a very beneficial decision for us.
Kevin, is there any more in Stowe that you're aware of?
Evgenia, any questions that you have?
I don't have any extra questions. Thank you so much for the presentation. Some of my questions were already addressed.
Great, that's it for Stowe. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Now the members from Lancaster, are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to offer one.
Okay, who am I speaking with?
This is Stan.
Hi, Stan. Go ahead, Stan.
Do you remember me?
Occasionally.
Oh, you're trying to forget me. No, I have got one comment and one question. Ross, you did a very good job presentation. I got to tell you, it was thorough and understandable. 2 good traits. My question is to whomever this is most apropos to, is there going to be an opportunity to renegotiate any of the interest rates that have been currently presented?
Mr. Mulcairn, that sounds like yours.
Yeah, Mr. Starr, are you speaking relative to the borrowing for the high school project?
Yes, sir.
So with our first bond, you know, Superintendent Downing said our total borrow on this project of the $241 million high school is about $160 million right now. We did the initial $30 million bond again to get us going and get us through cash flow for at least, if not more than 1 calendar year. At the time, like I said, interest rates were going up, and no necessary reason to do anything long-term or full at that point. So that $30 million bond would not be able to be refinanced for, I think it's a period of 9 years. Kate Hodges would be really good at reminding me of this. This is my first time through municipal bonding, but so we wouldn't be able to do that. However, given the news that's coming out of the Fed recently, although they haven't reduced rates, they are saying that the news and the data is good that they could in the future. So when we go to do more borrowing and start our look at more borrowing this summer, that will probably come on board next fall. We hope that the interest rates as we borrow more will come down. If they don't, we'll continue to build a better picture of how we want to approach that borrowing. So that initial interest rate, no, that wouldn't be something that we would be able to negotiate anytime soon.
Okay, so you're barbelling essentially for the bonds.
Is there any more from Lancaster? I have a couple. First of all, I guess, Ross, we've discussed circuit breakers. Have all those been acknowledged in this budget?
Yeah, so I know that you've been in attendance at budget and warrant subcommittees recently as we're addressing our special education costs, and there's certain levers that we can pull from time to time, and we're looking at those right now. Nothing's set in stone yet to support this fiscal year. That would not have any impact to taxpayers. When we look at the building of the budget for FY25, Mr. Trussell, we have already built in our offset from our projected circuit breaker.
Okay.
Again, those are projections. The budget is a plan, but we feel good about what we believe will bring in circuit breaker, which is a special education relief mechanism through the state for high cost special education. It does not cover everything. Obviously, it's only a portion of the high costs and not every high cost. But we feel good about what our projection is, and we've already applied that to the FY25 budget.
All right, thank you. And my last question for myself is, you've upped E&D, the use of E&D, thank you. But what does that leave us as a balance in E&D? And as compared to previous years?
Yeah, so it's actually going to be more significant than previous years. We've been down to a pretty thin margin in this school district on E&D, and again, it depends upon the year. But what we're looking at right now, as compared to the previous use, the last time we used 1.2 out of approximately 1.5 million. So that left us with approximately a $300,000 balance. If we're going to use 1.7 of 2.4, we're increasing our remaining balance. But I think to your point is that, this is something that has to be thoughtfully, carefully watched and considered when making the determination of what that allocation out of the surplus is going to be.
Yes,
Mr.
that
Trussell,
was.
I'd like to comment on E&D as well.
Please do.
So this is what I anticipate is going to be an important point of debate tomorrow night with the school committee. As we look to our E&D, our healthy E&D accounts are supportive in the bonding of the high school and future bonding. So we need to maintain healthy balances in our E&D accounts. And given the factor that we did not receive the Student Opportunity Act dollars that we were anticipating this year, adding an additional $500,000 out of E&D to the budget to help us navigate this year is not a lever we can do year over year. We have to be able to maintain that much in the same way that towns maintain their free cash, using one-time funds to pay for operational methodologies is not something any of us want to do. But in the meetings that we've had with our town administrators, we all recognize there's a degree of that we need to address there. So the 500 that's been increased there, frankly, is an extraordinary step. And I expect a lot of debate from our committee tomorrow night about that recommendation.
Okay. Are there any more questions from anyone? Let's open it up to the whole eligible group now. Hearing none, let me ask Kirk and Ross, is there anything you would like to add to this meeting?
Mr. Mulcairn, I'll let you go first.
I'll certainly say that we appreciate the partnership and the open dialogue with our 3 town administrators as we do this work, and the questions and feedback from the FinComs and the advisory committees are greatly appreciated. We certainly do a significant amount of work and steps in planning this budget and in going back to our principals or to our department heads or coordinators or directors. We do our very best to project revenues, but at the end of the day, we put this together. We understand there's a partnership with our 3 member towns in executing the very best that we can in our classrooms every day for our students. So I would just say thank you, Mr. Trussell, to those members of the boards and the TAs that are here tonight.
And Mr. Trussell, if I can close by saying, indeed, March 6th, I can confirm one of our slides is wrong. We had an old slide on the 13th. We moved it to the 6th. We added the 6th as a meeting, the school committee did, because we knew that this particular budget season was going to be a challenge, and we wanted to add some extra time so that there was a week between the hearing and the school committee vote. So the hearing will be March 6th. And that's for anyone in the public to come and comment on the budget to date. So again, Mr. Trussell, I can't thank you enough for your graciousness to all the committee members from Bolton, Lancaster, and Stowe. We appreciate the time to put this information forward to you. And I'll offer to the chairs that if, as the chair, you want to reach out for more information, please reach out to me directly, and I will either get that for you or direct Mr. Mulcairn to get that for you as well.
Thank you, Kirk. Kevin, you don't need to close your meeting, I guess.
Correct.
Bob, would you like to go forward and close your meeting, or
Sure.
unless there was some other?
Sure, sure. Yes, thank you. Again, thanks to everyone for the great presentations, and Mr. Trussell, thanks for hosting the meeting. For the Bolton Advisory Committee, we will adjourn here in a moment, and then we're going to reconvene with the other Zoom link that you have, and that's been posted. Okay, for the Bolton Advisory Committee, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second that.
All right, Bolton Advisory Committee, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, great. We are adjourned. Again, Mr. Trussell, thank you very much for hosting, and everyone have a good night.
Thank you, Bob. Now I'll call on the members of the Lancaster Committee for a motion to adjourn.
So move, Mr. Chairman. This is Stan.
Dan,
I'll second.
Thank
Michelle,
you.
thanks, please.
Is there any discussion? I doubt it. Let's have a voice vote. Stan,
Aye.
Jocelyn, Michelle,
Yes.
and Dick. Yes, I don't see Emily. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.